Well, over the last 6 or so months, there have been countless discussions about what does the future of EV tax credits look like. Just yesterday, we had a little bit of an update, and it kind of starts to paint a picture of where we're headed down this road of EV tax credits. Now, we do not have a clear decision or a clear direction. However, the update from yesterday may on paper sound like bad news, but if you stick with me, it may not be quite so bad. So let's talk about it just a little bit. And of course, before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Phantom Wallet. At Phantom Wallet, they have so many different styles and so many different color options. You're sure to find something that meets your unique style. So regardless of how far away your galaxy is, Phantom's got the wallet just for you. Be sure to use code BTG to save 10%. So first, let's talk about the update we just got yesterday. Yesterday, it was announced that a bipartisan bill effort was just agreed upon by President Biden. Now, this bipartisan group met with Biden, of course, with the intent of coming up with a bill that both parties believe that they could get support to get passed in the Senate, and of course, that Biden would approve of. So with this bill, unfortunately, there's some bad news, but there will be some good news later. First and foremost, there was $100 billion in the original proposal that included EV tax incentives. These were point of sale tax incentives that this has completely been removed from this bipartisan effort. The American Jobs Plan is the bill that they're working on right now, and it's roughly $2 trillion. It did, of course, include $100 billion in EV tax incentives that I was talking about. In addition, it did include 500,000 charging stalls by the year 2030. Now, these tax incentives that they were negotiating on were a point of sale incentive. So rather than having to have a tax liability, you would get this off the purchase price at time of purchase. But we'll talk more about that later. So in this bipartisan effort, they basically trimmed the bill in half. So it's now roughly $1 trillion in value. That did completely eliminate the EV tax credits that were being talked about. Now with that, it's not a complete loss for the EV market because there was $7.5 billion earmarked for charging infrastructure to be spent to boost what's currently out there. So this is a good thing. Helping to build public charging access is very important to the future growth of the EV market. So this is a big win. In addition, there was another $7.5 billion earmarked for electric bus and other transportation methods. Basically, what it boils down to is Biden says we got 2/3 of what we were asking for. Now on paper, it's more like we got half of what we're asking for, but that's neither here nor there. Biden did follow that up by saying there was no agreement on the rest and that they would need to do that following the budget process. So of course, right now the Senate is split across party lines. It's 50-50. So what that means is with the filibuster rules in place, they have to have more than 2/3 vote in order to pass something in the Senate. So with 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats, given the state of things in Congress, you can understand why that's a bit of a problem. However, there is a budget process rule that allows for the Senate to roll through different types of things through the budget process to get things done and passed and approved without the need for the 2/3 vote. So with that, they're going to apparently utilize this process to push forward some of their other plans that they weren't able to get agreement on. So to wrap that all up, the American Jobs Plan does include tax increases, but it will not impact anybody making $400,000 or less. Biden did also say that this would not include an increase in the gas tax, and that rumor about increasing taxes on EVs, that has since been squashed. So that is also not included in this new bill. Now, assuming that Republicans and Democrats in the rest of the Senate can come together and at least get a majority vote on this, we believe that this can be passed, and they're targeting a September timeframe for this particular bill to be done. So again, anything to do with EV tax credits that will impact you at your purchase, that is going to happen through a different process altogether. There is no agreement, and they are too far apart apparently to make anything happen in this realm, which is probably not a surprise. So now I want to talk about the two prevailing bills that we have that we know about right now. One of those is in the House and one of those is in the Senate. The one in the House is one we've known about for some time. This is the Green Act of 2021. So as a refresh, the Green Act of 2021 would take the current cap of 200,000 vehicles off the table. It's going to increase that to 600,000. So companies like Tesla and GM, they've already phased out of any of that $7,500 tax credit that's been available since roughly 2008 or 9. What this does is any cars that they've sold between that 200,000 and when this bill would be signed into law if it were to pass would not count towards the 600,000 vehicles. In fact, that 600,000 clock would start after this bill was signed. So there's quite a bit of room for companies like Tesla and like GM to start realizing some benefits of the EV tax program once again. One of the things that they are going to do in this tax bill though is to reduce that 7,500 down to 7,000, and there is a phase up plan based on the size of the battery. But essentially if you buy an electric vehicle, you're likely to qualify for the whole thing. But this is a tax credit. This is not a point of sale benefit. This is not something that absolutely everybody will qualify for. What that means is you have to have at least $7,000 of tax liability to receive this credit. So this would not impact everybody equally, and just because we both bought the same car, if I have more tax liability than you do, I may qualify for the full $7,000 and you may qualify for a lot less. So because of that, there is some concern about, is this a fair type of tax incentive to have for EVs? Now there is one more thing. In the existing bill that we still have today, where you can get $7,500 in tax credits, that does phase out. Once a manufacturer has sold 200,000 cars in this program, they then start to phase out. It basically gets cut in half, and then it gets cut in half again. So over the course of the next year, this program goes away completely for that particular manufacturer. What the new bill is proposing is doing a one-time 50% cutback for 1 quarter instead of 6 months. So once they hit 600,000, that next quarter it goes to half, and then the next quarter after that, there's no more credit at all for that manufacturer or the consumers of that manufacturer. There is, however, a pretty unique addition in this bill. The bill does propose an incentive for used EVs, which I think is a brilliant idea. It does have some limitations. So essentially, if you buy a used EV that's at least 2 years old and is not more than $25,000, you would qualify for a $2,500 tax credit. But again, this is a tax credit and you must have tax liability of that amount or more to be able to receive that $2,500. So now let's pivot over to the Senate, and this is where some more fresh ideas are coming from, believe it or not. And these are not being brought up by Republicans, so this still is kind of a partisan bill that's been put together, and it's just a proposal. This has not been voted on, and it's not quite likely that it's going to continue in its existing form, but we'll just have to wait and see. So this bill is called the Clean Energy for America Act. Essentially what this bill does is takes that current $7,500 tax credit, turns it into a point of sale benefit, meaning that there's no tax liability requirements in order to qualify, and then it starts to step up instead of down. So $7,500 tax credit for all EVs. Now, if the car is built in the United States, it would increase by $2,500, meaning it's a $10,000 tax credit. And if it's built in the United States by a union workforce, it's now a $12,500 tax credit. Now, of course, there's going to be some political issues with the way that they have that worded. However, what this is doing is targeting cars built in the United States, and then in addition, of course, a union workforce. So there may be some challenges there, but incentivizing built in America cars, that's a good thing. So right now, as it sits, GM would be the only one to qualify for the $12,500 tax credit. Ford has a little bit of a challenge here because the Mach-E is built in Mexico. And now moving on to Tesla, since Tesla is made in the United States, but it's not a union workforce, those would qualify for a $10,000 credit. So basically, when you go to buy a $40,000 Tesla, take $10,000 off that at the time of purchase. That's your new price. You now pay $30,000. You don't wait for tax time. You don't mess with anything. It happens at the time of purchase, which is a really good incentive. Now for the rest of everybody else. So in Germany, there's a lot of work right now with BMW and Audi, and there's a lot of offshore manufacturing happening with EVs, and it's starting to ramp up. As those come into the United States, they would still qualify for the $7,500 tax credit, which is still a win. And this is still good news as we look at the EV picture as a whole. After all, the more EVs we get, the more money is going to be poured into R&D by these companies, which means more competition, and it means better outcomes for us as consumers. Now, with this Clean Energy for America Act, there are some additional limitations to talk about. First and foremost, the MSRP on the vehicle cannot exceed $80,000, which I think is really smart. Is $80,000 the right number? That I don't know, but at least there is a cap. Somebody buying a Porsche Taycan does not need an incentive to buy that car. As an example, somebody buying a Plaid Model S also does not need an incentive to make that purchase. However, a Model S long-range all-wheel drive, as it sits right now, is $79,990. So this would qualify for the whole credit. So this is great news. Everything $80,000 and below would qualify for that tax credit regardless of which one of the three it is, $7,500, $10,000, or $12,500. The Clean Energy for America's Act would continue until 50% of total sales represent EVs in the United States. At that point in time, there's a 2-year sunset. In the first year, they would be reduced by 25%. In the second year, it would be reduced by 50% until the third year when they're all gone altogether. There are no restrictions on how many cars can be sold, which means it is a fair game for everybody, and everybody's qualifying for at least some tax credits and pretty substantial ones. What's the level today is the baseline for everybody, so I think that's a good thing. However, there are going to be some challenges, as we all can imagine, in Congress about incentivizing a union workforce versus a non-union workforce, and on and on and on. I think there's also some challenges with companies like Ford who are building the Mach-E in Mexico. That's probably going to create some challenges with the way our political system works with lobbying, so we'll see how this ends up forming in its final state. Now, I do want to talk about the challenges that this bill does face, because this was passed by the committee in a 14-14 vote, which based on the rules mean it has passed for vote. So now it has to go into the Senate and be brought up for vote. It's not likely that it's going to be brought up for vote in its current form. There's just not enough support for it as it sits right now. So what happens now is they start to dissect this and start to take things away, put things in, and they negotiate back and forth. In addition, they could just roll this through in the budget process potentially, but there are some challenges and they can't do this for everything. But this has been talked about potentially being able to be pushed through via the budget process. So we will see if that's ultimately what they end up doing in the Senate. Whatever they do in the Senate, the House is very likely to follow suit, as Democrats have control, and that is a high priority for that political party. There's no guarantees in this, however, so that anything could happen and anything could change at any point in time. So again, with the update to the American Jobs Plan, we now have some direction on what they're headed to with this big infrastructure bill. The American Jobs Plan will not include EV tax credits. So we're going to have to keep waiting and keep holding until we find out which direction they're going to go and ultimately push through some sort of new refresh plan to help incentivize and bolster the EV market here in the United States. I hope that you liked this video. I hope that this update was informative. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, of course, subscribe to the channel as we continue to post content regularly. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at BeardedTesla. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.